Welcome back to the channel, and it is my favorite time of week because I get to talk about Malazan in depth, which we all know is where my heart lies. It is going to be part 2 of the in-depth reread, kind of read-along of Gardens of the Moon. Today we're going to be covering Darujhistan. So obviously this is part 2 in my reread series, so if you haven't seen part 1, I'll go ahead and link that above. I encourage you to go check that out. Basically, for any new viewers, I'm just going to be rereading Gardens of the Moon and hopefully all the Books of the Fallen, all 10 of the Malazan books, that is, and then do a video on each part of the book, giving my in-depth thoughts, kind of summarizing it, going through what actually happened, really sinking my teeth in to what's going on in the book, rather than just doing kind of a surface level review, even if spoiler review. But as far as the series goes, I'll obviously keep it non-spoiler for the series as a whole, because I finished it, so I'll keep it non-spoiler for that. But actually, as far as the events that occur in the part 2, that I'm going to be covering, obviously that'll have spoilers for the part, but not the rest of the book, if you will. So yeah, if you haven't already watched part 1, go check that out. If not, you know why you're here. So let's get into it. And Eric does something he's infamous for. Part 1, obviously, we're getting our feet on the ground. We're getting accustomed to his writing style a bit. We met some great characters in the Bridge Burners. There was this whole kind of mysterious plot going on with Taishran. It wasn't super clear whether Taishran actually ordered the attacks and killed some of the Bridge Burners, or what exactly happened there. And then Whiskey Jack and his crew obviously then got reassigned to Darujhistan, kind of vowing that they're not going to give up this investigation, if you will, into Taishran. So you're thinking, if this is a normal author, we're going to find out more about that. But no, like I said, Erickson is infamous for this. Right as we're getting our feet on the ground, we're getting accustomed to these characters that he just introduced. He sets those aside, and although we are in Darujhistan, he has not yet introduced Whiskey Jack and his crew, who obviously have just flown there for, using the Maranth. So we actually don't get any of the Whiskey Jack or Bridge Burners or any real development in that storyline. Rather, he introduces a new cast of characters, which if you finish the part, which you should have by now, if you're watching this, you'll know this is a whole new group of characters, and he doesn't really even reference the events that we covered in part 1 at all, other than when Baruch and Rake are talking about the events of Pale, and I'll get into that more, but don't be discouraged is what I'll say. I compare Malazan a lot to, I play a lot of video games, so I compare it a lot to like a MOBA or an MMO. At the beginning, when you're a completely new player, you really sometimes just have to, I don't want to, grind out is the right word for video games, but not so much for these books, but almost in a way grind out. I hesitate to use that word because it makes it seem unenjoyable, which it isn't. Obviously part 1 was, for me at least, and I think for many of us, very epic and grand and awesome with the Siege of Pale. And Darujhistan itself has some very, very good, interesting, intriguing elements in it. But in the sense, it's like a MOBA and an MMO in the more time you're willing to invest and spend in the world, or, diving in deeper, if you will, the greater the reward and the payout is at the end. Obviously, if you're an MMO or MOBA player, you'll know that you get so invested into a game, you don't even want to play anything else because you're so far in, and you've kind of put in all the legwork, and now you can really enjoy it for its fullest. Erickson's writing does feel a bit that way. He introduces you to a ton of characters, but you'll come to find, the more you read Malazan, the payout is well worth it. And like I said, even when he's introducing these characters, it's still enjoyable. But what he's able to do with all these characters in the climax of his stories is incredible, because you get to see the climax from like, sometimes it feels like 50 different angles. So it makes it for a really unique and unusual reading experience. But it's almost like he's the conductor of an orchestra at that point, because there are so many players involved that he's spent time developing as characters. They all feel unique and rich. And it just makes for a great payout. So hopefully you're not too discouraged by switching characters, if you will. Setting the bridge burners aside for now, what I will say is it is all worth it. So anyways, let's jump into Darujhistan, obviously part 2, Gardens of the Moon. I just want to start off by giving my thoughts. So in part 1, we have this great epic siege of Pale. It really puts on display what Ericsson's battle writing can, the heights of his battle writing and like the mage warfare, how epic that can be. Darujhistan is a very different feel. It's a city that feels alive. It's extremely rich culturally. You have, once again, there's a theme here. You have a lot of different players, if you will. You have the council, the councilmen, you've got the alchemists, you've also got, it seems like there's a very heavy thieving culture here. So you got the thieves, and then kind of along with the thieves, you have the assassin guild, which, seems to be pretty influential, we're coming to find out, in the city, and how it's run, not run, but it's just a part of the city, another cog in the machine, if you will. So Darujhistan as a city, such a great setting, and like I said, Darujhistan almost feels like a character itself. You've got, what I love, you've got kind of like the Undercity with the assassins and the thieves, but really they're like the rooftops of the city, because at night assassins and thieves just kind of, that's their world. They're up on the rooftops, and Crocus, who I'll get into obviously, even describes thieves have laid, so you have clotheslines, while the thieves have marked certain clothesline where they've strung, reinforced it with wire. So thieves have their own like network of kind of getting around the rooftops, escaping things quickly. So like I said, the real emphasis here is just Darujhistan as a city. Such a great setting, such a great city, that is definitely a pillar as far as the series goes as a whole, a major player, if you will. So it feels really good to be back, rereading it, seeing it for the first time, for a second time, if you will, again, with fresh eyes, was really, really cool. And in part 1, remember, we were starting to get familiarized with and get a feel for the ascendants and the gods of this world. We had Open, obviously, marked by the spinning coin, primarily through Tattersail and the Deck of Dragons, being a major player here, and putting their hand in this world and stirring things up in the mortal world, which Whiskey Jack has warned us seemingly time and time again is never good for the mortals, kind of caught in the crossfire, if you will. So Open, unsurprisingly, continues to be a primary influencer in seemingly everything that's going on, and that continues here in part 2. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of what actually happened. We meet some really, really great characters, some fan favorites, and the first of which is Krepa. I think originally, I'm not sure if it's Krepa or Krupp, so let me know the correct pronunciation below. Even though I've read the series, I say it as Krepa, but if that bothers you, I'm willing to change my ways. As hard as that may be at this point. But we meet Krepa, and right away, so one of like I said, a fan favorite, one of my favorites. You'll either love him or hate him, is what I'll say, because he's very goofy. I love the way he talks in like riddles and jokes, and you can never seemingly get a straight answer from him. He kind of comes off and plays the fool very much so, but you know, as a reader, something more is going on here. And we see that right away, almost immediately. Part 2 in chapter 5 starts off with Krepa's dream, and immediately we get the sense that something deeper is going on here. We learn that when Krepa talks, you try and pay attention. You wade through the jokes and the absurdity and the comedy, and underneath it usually is something really, really profound, or maybe even foreshadowing. So when Krepa talks, you pay attention. And he comes out, and like I said, as a reader, we know this, and the kind of crew around him, you get a sense that some people just dismiss him as a fool. Others know that there's more going on there, that maybe he's hiding some things, and he's just playing it up. But immediately in this chapter, we learn to pay attention when Krepa talks, because he comes right out in this dream and tells us, let me see if I can't find the quote real quick here. Yeah, so like I said, he comes out right and says it, and it's perfectly clear in this quote here. If you've got the mass market paperback, as my bookmark just went flying out, it's page 162, but Krepa says, for some, the talent they possess found its channel through a toss of knuckle bones, the reading of heat fractures and scalpeli, or the fatigue of the deck of dragons. For Krepa, he had no need for any such affections. The power of divination was in his head, and he could not deny it, no matter how hard he tried. Within the walls of his skull rang the dirge of prophecy, and it echoed through his bones. So if you missed that, or you weren't paying attention, you may have just thought he's just a babbling fool. But he comes out and says it. A lot of his words are marked with prophecy. Obviously, a lot of foreshadowing there. So when Krepa talks, you pay attention as the reader. And obviously, I won't go into a ton of foreshadowing because I have finished the series. So it would be a bit unfair and spoiler for me to be like, oh, yeah, when he says this, this is what he's referring to. So I won't do any of that. You won't have to worry about that. But that I just love him as a character because he's so funny and absurd and comedic. It's really just hilarious to picture. He's like this, overweight, he's described, I'm pretty sure, as round, always bothering people for like wine or food, and just a great character overall. And his words, he's a lot wiser than he lets on. So he's just full of surprises and just such a great character. So after Krepa is introduced, we then follow an assassin. And like I mentioned, there's really 5 pieces here. We have the council, we have the thieves, we have the assassins, we have the alchemists, and then we have kind of our crew, Krepa, Raliknam, Murillo, and Crocus. So a lot of pieces, but one of those is obviously the Assassins Guild. We get introduced very early on through the eyes of an assassin who we know dies. That's Talo. He's on the rooftop and gets shot with a crossbow. Crocus also up on the rooftops doing his thieving thing. Gets spotted by Talo. Talo mistakenly thinks that Crocus was the one who shot him. So he tries to go after Crocus. And here we really see Open take a primary role in the events that are going to be unfolding in Darujhistan and the fate of the city, if you will, where Talo tries to fire on Crocus with his crossbow. And the second, the arrow's about to hit Crocus, a coin seemingly appears to fall out of nowhere. And Crocus he hears the coin drop, so he goes and reaches down to pick it up. And the arrow narrowly misses him. So this is obviously Open's doing. We obviously know the symbol of Open is represented by a spinning coin. coin appears out of nowhere. So Open taking a very active role. And then Tallow, interestingly enough, gets killed by a separate set of assassins, but they're described very interestingly. They're described as speaking a language that hasn't been spoken in Darujhistan for millennium. They're ancient beings, it appears. They have oddly shaped eyes, is what they say. So they kind of mysteriously kill Tallow as he's about to kill Crocus. They then see these mysterious beings who we know next to nothing as of right now about their motivations, other than they appear to be kind of an independent faction, another player, if you will. Like I said, a lot seems to be brewing in Darujhistan at this point. So they spot Crocus, and trying to leave no witnesses, they try and track him down and kill him. But for such a young kid, a young thief, if you will, he's got that coin now. So like every time an arrow's about to hit him, he like narrowly he stumbles or trips or falls or something where it barely misses, and he's able to retreat and lose them through his uncle's house. So that was just a very interesting thing that happened. Kind of this mysterious group we know pretty much next to nothing about, that just assassinated the assassins, if you will. And then Tallow also that night mentions that he saw, this is now the normal assassin guild, killing each other. So we also appear to have an assassin, like some strife, some conflict going on with the assassin guild itself. So we're going to want to pay attention and see how that develops. But yeah, Crocus is now in possession of Open's coin. With that, obviously he was very fortunate and lucky, if you will, kind of what Open represents, luck and destiny and fate and all that. Very mischievous god, it appears. So he's able to survive, but we know Whiskey Jack has warned us about being the pawn of a god or an ascendant is never a good thing. So we'll have to take notice and see. We've kind of seen the good that has brought Crocus. Obviously, he's alive, so that's great. Probably wouldn't be without Open's intervention, but we'll see when they come to kind of reap their rewards, if you will, how that develops. And this is kind of exemplified in the poem at the start of chapter 6. Obviously, we have these poems and little excerpts at the beginning of each chapter. A lot of them have to do with a little foreshadowing, sometimes about the chapter to come, sometimes reflecting on what has happened. Sometimes, I'll be honest, I don't know what everyone means. They can be very mysterious, but here, chapter 6, it's pretty clear that it's speaking on Crocus, who's a thief, kind of his fate now that Open's involved, giving an idea of the web that he's about to be entangled in, if you will. So I'll just read that here. Like I said, beginning of chapter 6, this is from Cabal, fragment from the year 1122 of Burned Sleep. So it goes, there is a Cabal breathing, deeper than the bellows, drawing up the emerald fires, beneath rain-glistened cobbles, while you may hear the groaning from the caverns below, the whisper of sorcery is less than the dying sigh of a thief stumbling unwilling into Darujistan's secret web. That thief seems to me is pretty clear is Crocus in this case. And then we also, speaking about the atmosphere of Darujhistan, it seems to be a pretty technologically advanced city. I forgot to mention this earlier because there's a gas pocket under the city that they've harnessed. And it's unclear where this came from. It appears to be from some sort of sorcery, it would seem. But anyways, the city has harnessed this gas and has gas lit lamps, if you will. So it creates a really cool atmosphere because the fire this gas emits is blue. So you have the rooftops, which are shadowy at night where the assassins and thieves roam. And you have a kind of blue underglow to the actual streets beneath them. So very, very cool atmosphere. Like I said, Darujhistan is such a wonderfully rich city. I love it. We have Crocus being entangled in a web, as foreshadowed in that little poem before chapter 6. So let's actually get into that. And it starts off with Crone, another fan favorite. And like I said, or one of my favorites anyways, this chapter, you're really introduced to a lot of fun, unique, interesting characters, which tend to be fan favorites, not surprisingly. So those poems are interesting. They're good to pay attention to. If you don't understand what they mean, I wouldn't worry about it. There's nothing really you're going to be missing out on. If you don't know what they mean, a lot of times you won't know what they mean unless you've read the series, maybe even a few times it seems. But they're just fun to pay attention to and see if you can't figure out what they might be referring to. And they're cool to look back on, especially on a reread. So let's actually jump into the events of chapter 6. We meet yet another fan favorite. Like I said at the beginning, this part is full of introductions to fan favorites. We have got Krepa. We get to take a closer look at Anamander Rake for the first time. And we also see here at the beginning of chapter 6, we're introduced to Crone, who is a great raven who can obviously speak, which is just awesome in its own right, but is also a very melodramatic, sassy, if you will, character. Is an ancient, she's described as being like over 100,000 years old, an ancient being. Great ravens are described as feeding on magic, which is why they tend to swarm around moon spawn, which is obviously, as we saw Anamander Rake, they're the members or the people living in Moonspawn seem to be powerful sorcerers. So it's no surprise that the great ravens who feed off that make their home, which also just makes Moonspawn even like more epic. The fact that you have these great ravens who I think it's says their wingspan are like 16 feet, so they're absolutely massive, and you have like thousands and thousands of them kind of just flying around and circling during the Siege of Pale. Just creates, once again, a really awesome atmosphere. Already Erickson is putting on display that he really knows how to set the scene, if you will. So we meet Crone at the beginning, and then Baruch, who is the kind of the head of this alchemist guild, who we come to find out more and more are more than they seem. This is once again another common thing in this chapter, or in this part rather. Everything is not what it seems on the surface. Baruch, the head of the alchemist, he's kind of the head of that group who really do a lot of the real running and behind the scenes. They hold a lot of the behind the scenes power, whereas the council tends to just be more of a figurehead, we find out. So yeah, we have a nice back and forth with Crone and Baruch. And then we also see the council, our first real look at a councilman. That's Councilman Orr comes in, who seems to just be a bit of a power-hungry idiot, we come to find out. He's discussing with Baruch that, they're going to vote to just basically give Darujhistan over to Malazan over to the Malazan Empire rather than try to make a stand, just kind of roll over and surrender, if you will. For Councilman Orr, it's more just a play to try and remain and hold on to the power he thinks he holds now in the Malazan Empire, which he views as inevitable. That's a risky game to play because we've already seen Lacine likes to do a lot of cleansing of the nobles and the pre-existing hierarchy, so he's really gambling there. Baruch pretty much says it's a terrible idea, at which Councilman Orr says, well, I don't really care what you think because we have the majority of the votes for this surrender to go through, even if it's only by one. And then Crone, who once again is this, hundred of thousands a year old, very wise being, although being a big giant speaking raven, is very wise, says he's to utter those words out loud when we know Open is kind of playing a role here was really stupid, essentially. And at this moment, we do find out Open was paying attention so we now know that vote to surrender the city is the majority of just one. We then cut to a scene where Ralik Nam is about to assassinate Lady Simtal for reasons are somewhat unclear right now. It seems like he's got a vendetta with her for some reason, for a personal reason. He's described as not acting on the Assassin Guild. It's not part of his Assassin Guild, and not an assignment from the guild, if you will. So she's meeting with another councilman, who, forgive me if I forget, I think it's Councilman Lim. But as kind of simultaneously, due to kind of Open's meddling, Councilman Orr, with the conversation with Baruch and Crone, says, oh, don't worry, we have the majority of the votes, if not only by one, to surrender the city, so it's kind of a moot point. At that moment, Open seems to meddle directly, and Ralik Nam has this great idea, which seems, weird, because he's not one to kind of create these master plans. That's more his friends Murillo's doing. But he turns his crossbow from Lady Simtal to Councilman Lim and fires on her. We obviously know as the reader that the majority vote is now going to be in a deadlock. And that's really where the events lead into the next part. We obviously get, we see Ralik Nam's and Murillo's. They have some sort of scheme going on, where Murillo meets with actually Councilman Orr's wife to arrange an invitation to this event or party, if you will, with all the councilmen there. So we're going to see how that unfolds. But Open definitely playing a part here. Councilman Orr definitely not heeding any sort of wisdom, it would seem, speaking openly and confidently. But there's now an ascendant involved, and Baruch leaves off the part in general. It concludes with Baruch saying, now that Open's involved, all his carefully laid schemes and plans could basically be thrown out the window, because Open will meddle and do what, influence events kind of beyond the scope of a mere mortal that Baruch is. So he's ready for his plans to get wrecked, but we're kind of going to see how everything plays out now that we have a lot of scheming going on. And then I also do want to mention we have Anamander Rake, who meets with Baruch as well. This is after Councilman Orr meets with them. So we see Anamander Rake, our final fan favorite, if you will, that gets really introduced in this chapter. I know we technically saw him during the Siege of Pale. He's the awesome guy with a sword standing on a floating moon, firing sorcery down on an entire army filled with Malazan mages and soldiers, and basically holds them off by himself. We actually get a closer look at him. We get some dialogue with him. We don't get to jump in his head because that's an intentional decision Erikson makes. You'd never get to see inside of Anamander Rake's head. It kind of builds his mythos, creates more, like he seems more awe-inspiring because you never get to see behind the curtain. It's very much a conscious decision from the author's part to do that, which once again, you just got to place your trust in Erikson, because boy, does it pay dividends later on. So yes, we have a conversation with Anamander Rake and Baruch. We come to find out that the wizards, the sorcerers at Pale, abandoned their city basically to fall, much like what Councilman Orr wants to do. They abandoned their city, so Anamander Rake furious with them, because if he had the help of Pale's sorcerers, he's positive he could have held off the Malazan army. until his own reinforcements were able to arrive. But they pretty much throw him to the wolves. They try to escape the city, and they actually run to Darujhistan, where Animander Rake states he has been hunting them down and killing them with his giant two-handed sword, which is also awesome. Which seems to be more than just a sword, because Rake says, I was able to track down all but 2 of them. And he basically knows, Baruch knows pretty much everything going on in the city. So he says, turn them over to me. And Baruch says, I'll deal with how are you planning on dealing with them? Were you going to kill them with that sword? And you can tell Baruch, even for someone as powerful as he seems to be, is very weary and almost afraid of the sword on Animander Rake's back. So there's more, once again, more than just what's on the surface. Is really a theme going on here, especially in this part. And Rake says, of course I would kill them with my sword. So Baruch says, I'll just bring you their heads. And Animander Rake replies, you have too much mercy. So it seems like this sword is pretty terrible, and we'll come to learn more about it, obviously, throughout this book and the series as a whole. But yeah, just wanted to point that out, that just another element of Animander Rake. I might have to do like a character tier list, or like ranking my favorite characters. Animander Rake is very much up there. He is one of the just most awe-inspiring characters in all of fantasy for me that I've ever read, full stop. So just really cool, and it was great revisiting the chapter where you really get your first look at him, and you really get his first few lines of dialogue. And even in just a few pages, you already get the sense of how almost like bigger than life he seems to be. So really, really great part. Really happy with the reread so far. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Let me know your thoughts on the videos. Let me know how you guys are liking the format. And yeah, I hope to catch you in the next one. If you are still around, let me know down below where you are as far as your series read goes. What part of which book are you on? It's always cool seeing where you guys are at. So let me know your thoughts, and like and subscribe.